Hey everyone, Panda here. Welcome back to Warband. For those new to these mini-series, I do two videos on a game, one being a review and the second, which is this one, being a video to help new players get started with the game. Now we've got introductions out of the way, let's actually get settled into Warband, which actually begins, I feel, before you even start the game up. I say this, as even though I said most mods aren't indicative of how good a game is, I highly suggest regardless playing with at least some. Now I can't give guides to the big full conversion mods as they vary the game far too much, but I can at least give you a link to a guide by Meadows for installing them in the description, which also includes some links to some really good mods as well. If, however, you're playing the native game, a couple of mods I'd suggest you try at least, which I'll provide links to in the description, are Tweak MB and Warband Battle Sizer. Both of these are simple, they don't change the game up too much, but they tweak the game to be so much more enjoyable for you. Tweak MB, for instance, allows you to change such things as Lord getting pissed off when you assign fiefs, which is really goddamn annoying, or how much stuff you get from a battle, while Battle Sizer, as the name would suggest, simply allows you to make the fights in Warband much more massive, or small, depending on your preference. Now with all that guff out of the way, let's actually get started in the game then, shall we? And as we take things from the top, you'll of course need to make a character. I won't need to tell you how to make your character exactly since it's your character after all, but here's a few tips regardless for you to help you along the way a bit. And number one is use a table explaining what each choice means. I'll provide the link in the description for you. And this is important as these choices, they're not too descriptive. They don't tell you anything on what you'll get, and the only time you find out is after you've already picked everything and you can't exactly go back and unchoose everything, which is a bit shit, but regardless, using a table will actually help a lot in that regard. Number two, remember that these choices are largely meaningless. You won't get asked about your past or your history whatsoever in the game, and ultimately these choices really only help you get a bit of an edge in the early game. None of these choices affect what you're going to be doing in the game whatsoever. You can start out with a lot in one-handed and then go out and learn crossbow skill, if that is what your thing is, for instance. Number three, choices that help you fight in combat are going to be more useful if you follow this guide. And this is only important if you follow this guide, so you can completely disregard number three if you so desire. Now, while these aren't a lot of tips, keeping them in mind will make your time in the game a little bit easier, I feel. With our character done, we end up in some parts of the world getting attacked. This questline is fairly self-explanatory, so I won't go into too many details here, but once you've completed that quest, I'd recommend tweaking the difficulty settings a little bit. I recommend this as I love how you can customize the difficulty without it being a simple easy, normal or hard. You can tailor your health to being much more compared to everyone else. You can tailor your enemies' AI to be harder or less hard or whatever you desire. And I think more games actually need this, as you can tailor the gameplay to how you personally love to play. Me, I play with my character being a bit tanky, as I love my character wading into combat destroying enemies with little regard for my own health, so I've adjusted how difficult I am to kill to be much easier. Next up, head to a town, not to be confused with villages, which are the small unwalled establishments, and go to an arena, both to practice fighting in preparation for the next step, and to find out where tournaments are being held. Fighting in the arena really helps you get a feel for what a tournament is like, as you're put with the same armies as your opponents and the same level of weapons, but you often get paired with varying types of weapons. And getting used to using different weapons is needed, as you're often using weapons that you aren't maining / leveling during tournaments. if you can get most of the way through an arena or have got a lot of self-confidence, then you might be in good shape to actually try a tournament. So try to talk to the arena guy again and find the location of a tournament. These are held in random locations, and the arena runners are the easiest way to find the location of them. Once you've set off for the closest one, try and use some of the money you've gained thus far to get around 10-15 troops. These will help to deter bandits and looters on the road to the tournament, and also if you ever do get into battle, they'll make sure you're not in an unwinnable situation. Also, you'll be gaining a lot of money quite soon to support your troops, so it is just a good idea in general to keep a handful around, at least for now. Tournaments, FYI, are excellent places for you to gain gold, reputation, and renown, the latter which is used to determine how large your army is. This is why hunting for tournaments early game is so desirable, as opposed to just going and working for a lord straight up. You can even dedicate the win for a lady if you're playing as a man, which has its various benefits. Regardless though, you actually have to win the tournament to be rolling in the dough, and there's a lot to tournaments that need addressing. Most importantly, the most lucrative way of gaining gold is by betting on yourself. This has downsides, however, as if you lose the tournament, you won't get any of the cash you placed on bets. So keep off of betting until you're actually sure you can win the tournament. Secondly, you will inevitably end up getting paired with a weapon that you are unfamiliar with or untrained in. In such a situation, where possible, you should keep to your allies and wait for someone to drop a more familiar weapon. In fact, sticking to your allies and getting a few easy knockouts is a good idea in general, as in the initial bouts, you can get into the next round if you're responsible for taking a few of the enemies out, even if you get downed yourself. Another thing to keep in mind, mounted opponents are surprisingly dumb. For instance, if they're using a lance, they will often poke at you uselessly with them instead of gaining some speed and trying to run you down with them. Another thing that they're really dumb with is they'll tend to crowd against walls and generally get stuck against walls. This you can use to your advantage, especially when you do not have a horse yourself, as you can then pinch their mounts and gain the bonus damage you get when using melee weapons as you ride people down. Lastly, tactics are very important in tournaments. Now, I had no idea about this myself until recently, but you can still use the function keys to direct your team to doing certain tasks, like holding back and letting two enemy teams duke it out before you come in and mop up the survivors. Now, these are only tips. This isn't a guide to always completing tournaments, as you'll often get into unwinnable situations like your whole team dying and then 10 people bum rushing you. But in general, if you follow these tips, you'll be more likely to win than otherwise. Oh, and before we move on from this, if you end up with a lance and shield, God save you, as RNGesus certainly isn't smiling upon you. Now then, assuming you've beaten tournaments a few times, you should have some nice wads of cash to your name and some nice reputation to go along with it. I'd recommend from this point buying some halfway decent armor for yourself, as well as investing in a business in one of the major towns. I'd suggest picking towns in a faction that you know you'll be suckering up to later on, as your profits can be seized if you end up going to war with the controlling faction. I suggest this as both your equipment and businesses you invest into cannot be taken away from you at all, no matter how bad you might be faring in the actual game. Now, to invest in a business which is surprisingly hidden away, you gotta take a walk through the town and find a guildmaster who, if you have no outstanding issues with the town or lord owning it, will allow you to buy a business which, of course, consistently most of the time will give you cash to offset your eventually growing army's needs. As to what businesses to pick, I'd suggest a dye works, as for the most part they've got the largest profits out of any business. There are exceptions to that, but I'm not going to list them all here. You can look them all up if you want to, but in general a dye works will be the most profitable option out of all the others. So then, by now you should hopefully at least have some cash, income from a business, as well as some skill and renown to make a halfway decent warband. From here though, you're on your own. I can't really add anything more to this that wouldn't, well, be hand-holding pretty much. Warband is, after all, an open world game, and you need to at least experience some of it on your own, exploring it in order to get at least the most enjoyment out of it as possible. Regardless though, I hope you found this helpful to getting started in Warband. I might actually make something recommending mods, as just recently I've been absolutely blown away by the Warsword Conquest mod, which pretty much marries Warhammer and Warband in just this match that's made in heaven. But that's a big maybe. Anyways, my name is Pandaloo. I'd like to thank you for watching thus far. Subscribe if you want to see more content and perhaps that mod recommendation. And I hope your conquests in Warband fare well.